We've gathered some key voices in the conservative movement to discuss what's being called the Civil War in the Republican Party. Dr. Russell Moore is president of the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention. Alfonso Aguilar is the president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles. Tammy Bruce is a radio talk show host and a Fox News contributor. And Matt Schlapp is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. Tammy, I want to start with you.
Sure.
Let's diagnose. We're all going to diagnose the moment, or you all are all going to diagnose the moment. What's the state of the conservative movement inside the Republican Party?
You know, and those two are very different these days, aren't they? I'm very much a conservative. I'm an independent voter, though. What I can tell you is that Donald Trump is the nominee for a reason. It's because of the failure of the Republican Party to stop the destruction of the country by the Democrats. I can tell you that 3.7 million women have been pushed into poverty since Barack Obama became president. According to the CEO of Gallup, about 25 million economic lives have been destroyed. 48% of Americans have a full-time job. That is the lowest since 1983. So when you look at the Republicans and what conservatives have expected from the Republican Party is to push back on issues and policies and laws that destroy people's lives. They have not done that. And what they're reaping now from, I think, the beginning of the Tea Party, let's say in 2009, is a reaction and a rejection by the American people. They ignored it then. They should have embraced it and routinized it. They ignored it in 10, in 14. They're ignoring it now. Donald Trump is the result of being ignored and of the American people wanting people's lives to get better and for the actual conservative ideal of economic freedom to prevail, which is the only thing that'll save our lives.
Alfonso, your diagnosis.
Well, I agree partly with that. I think that I wouldn't overstate the impact of Donald Trump in terms of his impact in the conservative movement. The differences that I think Tammy was talking about predate Donald Trump. And I think we could oversimplify it and say that there's, on one hand, we have an establishment that's too willing to give up principle, too tied to big interests, and then good conservatives who care deeply about the issues, but maybe too rigid sometimes. And in terms of the economy and income inequality and the woes that American workers are facing, they're too quick to blame trade and immigration. And that's a problem. But the good news is that between those two extremes, there are many Republicans who I think after this election can steer the party and the movement in the right direction.
But at the moment, Russell Moore, we have an election going on, and you have the Speaker of the House says he won't defend Donald Trump, and you have Mitch McConnell won't say his name. How do you see things at the moment?
Well, I think that's exactly what we see at the grassroots level. I mean, even when I'm talking to people who support Donald Trump, they do so with a conflicted conscience, and they do so with a certain sense of fear and trembling. But many of them are doing so that I talk to right now, especially evangelical Christians, not because they think he'll win, they think he'll lose, but because they're wanting to protest against a Hillary Clinton presidency, which will be awful and disastrous for many of the things that we're concerned about. But one of the things that concerns me is the personal and spiritual devastation that we see happening in this election. There are friendships that have broken apart. There are husbands and wives who don't speak to each other about the election right now. And there are people who are going through a genuine sense of despair about the future of the country and about the future of their own lives when they look at the kind of cultural coarsening that would lead us to a situation where on the left, people are saying the situations with the Clinton Foundation and the emails don't matter. And on the right, there are some people who are saying these comments about women are just locker room talk.
I want to get to that in a
moment. But we're all living through the Clinton marriage. That's what you're really saying.
What's your diagnosis, Matt?
I agree with much of what my friends here have said. I just think, yes, Obama, we got to give him great credit. He got almost all of his agenda through. While doing that, he has taken more legislative powers away from Congress. We have a constitutional crisis on our separation of powers. It's not all the Republicans' fault in Congress. He went around them. You know, he's been overturned more times by the federal court, this person who used to teach constitutional law, than any other president. He's put us in this kind of constitutional crisis. Obama deserves much credit for Trump as well, because name the bipartisan issue of substance that he was really able to work with the other side on to try to solve a big problem. Was it entitlements? No. Was it Obamacare? No. Democratic votes. He made big missteps for the country. It helped him politically, but the country finds itself divided like never before, and that's not what Obama ran on.
There are indelible moments that are happening here that some conservatives I talk to say we can't get back from. And on this question of character, you've got people saying, you know, what Donald Trump said was just what gets said in any old locker room, normalizing that behavior. I spent a lot of time covering conservatives who talked a lot about character. What happened to the character question?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is that the warnings of the old religious right have actually come true about the coarsening of a culture. I mean, I remember watching Bill Clinton on television dismissing essentially what happened with Monica Lewinsky, even when he admitted to it, and then attacking Ken Starr, and thinking, aren't the Democrats going to be morally outraged by this? And they weren't. Now we're seeing a situation where you have horrific talk about sexual assault and boasting and glorying in these things, which again isn't a one-off. This has been happening for a long time in the way he's been talking. And you see people trying to dismiss it as just locker room talk, or this is alpha male, as one person said. This is just the way that men talk. I'm hearing from a lot of women who are horrified, not just about what happened with Donald Trump. They know what Donald Trump is about, but by leaders who are silent or who are dismissive about this. I think that, forget what's happening in this election, that is going to have a long-term implication for the rest of the country.
Tammy, address that idea of leaders being silent, but then also Donald Trump has talked about his accusers. I mean, he's used some pretty tough words about those accusers and then evaluated them on their attractiveness, which seems to be the thing that got him in the trouble in the first place.
Yeah, it's really good we're not electing a husband or a boyfriend, isn't it? You know, we're electing a president who's, I look at him actually as if you're in the ambulance and you're going to the trauma center and there's a trauma surgeon. I'm not particularly going to care how that person's going to be speaking. That person is going to get you to be able to live another day, to be able to get out of that emergency room, to be able to function the next day. Now look, I can tell you that the Obamas probably have the best marriage since the Reagans in the White House. Mr. Obama clearly does not offend anyone when it comes to the nature of how he speaks about women or people. This nation is now going down the drain. And while I would prefer to have President Reagan back, we don't. So what I'm looking at is I'm voting for President Trump, for Mr. Trump, for the thousands of women who deserve to not be murdered, as an example, by the one of the 1.2 million illegal criminals, illegal alien criminals in this nation. There is violence. It's about economic freedom. It's about the jobs. Again, I mentioned earlier the 3.7 million women in poverty now since Obama became president. So yes, of course we would prefer fabulousness at every level. For Mr. Trump, I prefer to be offended by him on occasion than be left for dead by Hillary.
John, we keep going through this question about what is somebody who believes in strong traditional values in the culture. I agree so much with what you said about the fact that what we said was going to happen in the culture has happened in the culture. But when I talk to people of faith, first of all, they're completely offended by the emails that were released about them mocking Catholics and Christians. That was reprehensible, and we should cover that more. But second of all, Christians are no longer necessarily saying we're going to overturn Roe v. Wade. We're going to bring back traditional marriage. We're going to have prayer in the classroom. We don't even talk about prayer. You know what they want, John? They want to be left alone with their First Amendment rights to be able to practice their faith fully on in the job, in their home, in the raising of their children. Forcing nuns to buy contraception and these strange permutations that the Obama-Clinton policies have us in have Christian voters of faith in a different position. They will support, in many cases, not all cases, someone like Donald Trump because they think he will stand up and fight.
But look, I think it's more complicated than that. And look, inside the Beltway, I hear a lot of strategists say this is a binary choice. You know, if you want Hillary Clinton and all her bad policies, the Supreme Court being controlled by liberal judicial activist judges, then you know you have to vote for Trump. But the truth is, in America, different from other countries. This is not Italy, where you have Silvio Berlusconi doing something, you know, and with women, and then his poll numbers go up. This is America, and character counts. We've always considered character as paramount. The President of the United States is a moral reference. So yes, I'm appalled at Hillary Clinton, her scandals, her lies, but we have to vote. But to choose Donald Trump just because he's the anti-Hillary, I just think that a lot of us are going to come out and just leave that part of the ballot blank. Look, we had too many candidates in this primary. Despite our differences, the frustration here is that despite our differences, we know that if we had a serious candidate, we should be winning this election with all the scandals, everything that's coming out of WikiLeaks. Her candidacy would have been derailed.
Russell, if I'm a Republican and a lot have broken with the nominee after this tape came out, I mean, who is taking the moral position, the better moral position? The person who says, I have a fixed set of standards, these break those, I won't support that person? Or the person who says, I'm going to support Donald Trump, he's the nominee of my party, and I'm pledged to the party, and therefore I'm going to submit him? Who has the moral high ground?
Well, I can understand the person who's wrestling with his or her conscience and saying, I'm going to choose one or the other of these because of a lesser of two evils approach. I don't agree with that, but I can understand why someone would do that. I think that's very different than the people who are standing up and saying, well, we're not electing a pastor, we're not electing a Sunday school teacher, we're not electing a choir boy, we're electing someone who is simply going to be as mean and as tough as possible, and to act as though we fight lack of integrity and character with more lack of integrity and character. I think that is going to have
look, we
problems.
can't avoid
You
the
spoke
fact
directly
that
to my comment, though, about who we're electing. When you talk, I think it is important to think about women and character when we move forward. But when we talk about the issue about jobs, about the nature of who's going to build up the business in this country, the issue of regulations, of taxes, that is, you want to talk about an assault on women? The assault on women is destroying small businesses, having women live in their parents' basement until they're 30, the destruction of health care, our hospitals and doctors. So this does matter. And it is about hiring someone at this point, because we're in an existential battle for the future. So for every woman watching who's making a decision, yes, vote with women in mind and vote with the future in mind for yourself and your daughters, because this is the character that matters. It's surviving so that we can continue the greatness of the country.
Matt, let me set the question up, taking what Tammy said, is that the charge I hear is that these don't happen in silos. That when you don't respect the boundaries on the character front, your ability to solve things in just the way Tammy suggests is actually also eroded. That was the claim that's been made in other character instances. So why isn't that the case
I'm
here?
with the doctor on this. I think that your character matters, and I don't think you can kind of privatize your character. And I think it does permeate to what kind of president you're going to be. And what I know and what I've seen of Donald Trump is he's somebody who looked at the last 7.5 years of Barack Obama, and he woke up and got a lot more serious, and he realized his country was going down the drain. And I think he's lived a big, flamboyant life. I'm sure he's done tons of things we would all object to. But the fact is this, as he says, he is who he is. With the Clintons, let's just be honest. They say 2 for 1. She says Bill Clinton will run the economy. He was impeached. They were dead broke because they paid $850,000 to Paula Jones. They paid over $1 million in fines and settlements and fees. He was disbarred. He wasn't allowed to go to the Supreme Court.
And she's
the idea that the
bragging.
Clintons would make the moral case and the character case is absurd,
But
and I think many
bragged.
voters realize
But
that.
it's not a choice, it's standard.
But she's
Isn't that the
bragging in
question?
the WikiLeaks about the importance of being two-faced.
Yeah, and
to the,
I mean, private and a public.
I agree
it's
completely
extraordinary.
on the Clintons, but if this is more serious on the Trump side, then I think many Americans are saying, what have we come
But
to?
the
I'm afraid we're
Obama
gonna have
marriage
to-
and character disputes that about the nature of what's going to save this country, and perhaps, even just for 4 years, the steps we need to take to right her.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there.